everybody. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Nicole, Christy, and her team. I'm always so excited to come back. I was in your shoes or in these seats when I was 15. It's almost 10 years later, and I still feel the effects of this conference. I've still felt the effect of this conference throughout my entire early career. I am so grateful for the opportunities that this conference has opened me up to. When I attended this conference, I had no expectations, and I ended up meeting the best people. I ended up meeting my future mentors who I still really cherish and value and meet with to this day. And so what I want to leave you behind is be curious, not only in what today has to bring, be curious in what each other brings to the table as well, and make sure to get to know each other, get to know the panelists up here, and these will be lifelong connections that you'll be able to make. So thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lainey. I'm a current senior at USC, and I'm joined here by three wonderful panelists: Fire Chief Jeanine Nicholson, Dr. Mindy Romero, and Miss Erin Ross. So I'm just going to have them introduce themselves briefly, and we'll get started.
I'm just going to stand up so I can see everybody in back, so you're not texting or anything, you know. Hi, everybody. My name is Jeanine Nicholson. This is my niece right here, Lainey. So she got me down here from, you'll notice the same last name. She got me down here from San Francisco. So I am the fire chief of the San Francisco Fire Department. I've been in the department for 30 years. I worked my way up through the ranks, and I've been the chief for the last 5 years. I always say I won the lottery when I got my job in 1994 because I get to be of service every single day. And although I'm not riding on the fire engines or the fire trucks anymore, I get to steer the department in the way I want it to go with, around diversity, equity, inclusion, firefighter safety, all sorts of things like that. So I'm super stoked to be here with you all, and I'll pass it on to you, sister.
I won't stand up only because I'm tired. Rainy and wet outside. How is everybody doing? Good. Awake? Yeah.
We're all awake.
The rain can make you sleepy, but it also, well, for me at least, it's invigorating. I love the rain. Just for a few minutes, right?
Yeah.
We have. So I'm a professor at USC in the School of Public Policy, Price School of Public Policy. I actually don't live in LA. I live up in Sacramento. If you didn't know, USC has a building in Midtown Sacramento. It's a little quiet right now, but over the last 50 years, it's had an MPA program and lots of different events and exciting things that have come through it. And my research center, which I founded and I also still direct, called the Center for Inclusive Democracy, is formally housed there in, in Sacramento. And then I'm just back and forth a lot for events like this, for teaching, for other sorts of meetings and faculty things and things like that. I'm excited to be with you. But before I just say a little bit more about what I do, I just want to acknowledge Eleanor Love here, who is actually a member of my team at CID. She's our internship coordinator, and she's been with us as in some form as an intern since she was early on in high school. The only high school student we've ever had as an intern, and she's just pretty incredible, and we're lucky to have her. And I think I see way in the back a current intern, Duncan Law, also back there. So just a shout out to members of my team here. My research center, as the name suggests, we look at research under the democracy umbrella. Do a lot of research on election reforms, political behavior, political opinion. It's all about producing research in a nonpartisan academic setting, obviously, that informs efforts to both see increased participation in our democracy, but also increased representation. And that very much goes for young people, as young people are very underrepresented in both the electorate and in our larger civic and democracy spaces. So I'll stop there and pass it along.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Erin Ross, and I'm the CEO of a nonprofit organization called Girls Inc. of Los Angeles. Girls Inc. is a national organization in 78 communities across the United States and Canada. But in LA, we're really focused on working in a handful of communities and going deep. Our programs are focused on inspiring girls to be strong, smart, and bold, which I imagine you all are if you're here on a rainy Saturday morning. I have worked in the nonprofit sector for 24 years. I started a nonprofit organization when I was 19, when I was a college student. I ran that organization for 6 or 7 years and then moved back to Los Angeles where I grew up. Worked for another organization called Civic for about 15 years, and then was invited to become the CEO of Girls Inc. about 2.5 years ago. So I'm really excited. I am a very political person. The nonprofit sector sometimes has a reputation of having to sort of be separate because of the way the funding works and all of that. But at the end of the day, I got into the nonprofit sector because I saw that there were areas where our political leaders weren't able to address issues immediately. And there was a real need to address community issues immediately while continuing to advance a conversation with our political leaders about real long-term systemic change. So I'm really excited to hear a little bit from you all and share a little bit with this amazing group of women.
You want to ask a question?
Yes, I do.
All right, here you go.
Thank you guys so much. How about just one more quick round of applause for all three of the lovely women joining me?
Yay, my sister. Strong work, sister. Strong work.
So Chief Nicholson, we'll start with you and then just kind of work our way down. So what does community mean to you, and why should we care about our communities?
So community, I don't think there's one definition for community. I've been within multiple communities from growing up with my family. I wasn't growing up when she was little, obviously, but from growing up, from sports teams, from my spiritual community, from the LGBTQ community, and from the fire department community. And the fire department community, I'll just talk a little bit about that because we're a government organization. And the fire department community is sort of unlike any other career that I've seen in terms of community, because we live together for 24 hours, because we do all sorts of crazy stuff together, whether it's going into fires, whether it's helping people that have been shot or run over or what have you. And so we understand each other really well. We get each other, whereas somebody else may not be able to. And so that is a really important community to me, as are some of my others. But and then I have a really close group of female friends who we support each other and we're there for each other, because it's really easy for many of us, I'll speak for myself, to believe that we're imposters. The whole imposter syndrome thing. Well, you don't look like a fire chief, well, get used to it. So community is super, super important. I wouldn't be where I am today without it.
So community, I do think that most of the time when we use the word community, people are referring to or thinking about geography, right?
Mm-hmm.
The neighborhood that you live in, the side of town you live in, maybe your racial or ethnic group or your cultural group, right? I'm part of this community, I'm identified as that community, that sort of thing. And all of that's true. I think ultimately, though, community really is about meaning. So as humans, we need to make meaning, right? That's what we're trying to do in every moment of our lives. And the fact that you are Trojans and you say fight on and you're proud wearing the colors, right? That's incredibly meaningful for you as part of your college experience. For women, I don't think that I feel more and more actually in the last maybe couple of decades, at least from my perspective, we don't really talk about ourselves as a community of women or females, right? Mm-hmm. Cisgender, transgender, period. And I think for at least what I hear from a lot of the younger women that I work with or talk with or teach, that in a strive for equality, we sometimes feel like we're not supposed to identify, right, the shared challenges historically and still today that we have as women. And we think of ourselves as everything that we want and need to think about ourselves. You know, we're strong, we're capable, right? We're going to change the world. All of you are going to change the world, I am sure, in one way or another, but recognizing that we also need each other, right? With those unique experiences, those unique challenges, unique benefits of being a woman, right? But also the shared meaning that comes from all of that. And I think there's lots of things that we could talk about when we talk about community, but that just popped into my mind. It's just recognizing and holding that, and being respectful of how people identify, right, of course, and being respectful of those identified as being men, but at the same time recognizing the unique challenges historically and today that we have, and living in it and understanding that we need each other. And I will say that I don't, maybe one last thing if I may, also sometimes it's maybe the only community that you can connect with as a young woman sometimes. Maybe the community that you live in, maybe the 4, 5, 6, 10, right, types of different communities that you identify with maybe really aren't there for you. Your family might not be. I suspect for some of you here in this room, right, your family might not be there for you. Your neighborhood might not be there for you, your cultural group, for whatever reason, right? But maybe your young friends, right, in this room or in other places are the ones that are cheering you on and supporting you and holding your head when you're crying, right? And making plans to go to college together, right? And figuring out how to avoid that person who's harassing you at school, right? Whatever it might be. And so I just want to recognize, sometimes for some women, it is what you have here in this room and in other places that actually can be the dominant community that helps you achieve your goals and maybe also to survive, but not just survive, thrive.
I agree with everything that's just been said. The only thing I would add is I think your community is what you build it to be. And I think it's really important. I went to an event yesterday because I was invited to it by a woman who sat behind me in middle school social studies. I was in middle school a very long time ago. But she is now the Dean of Students at Mount St. Mary's College. And we haven't stayed in touch forever, but I'm actually very close with her brother. And so I think what you don't realize is there are people sitting in this room now, people you've sat in the rooms that if you are kind and you spend time getting to know them now, you have no idea what it will lead to much later in the future. And I think you'll hear a lot as you get older about this idea of networking and make sure you're building your network and you're staying in touch with people. But I think it's really more about building a community of champions in your own life. In my job, I have to do a lot of fundraising, so I have to ask people all the time for things, and asking people for things can be inherently really uncomfortable. But in the 25 years I've been doing this kind of work, I make sure I always show up places that I listen to people, I get to know them as people, so that when the opportunities present themselves to ask for something, it doesn't feel like it's coming out of nowhere or like kind of disingenuous or gross. It is like, oh, that's Erin. She took the time to get to know me when I was a new dad or when I was this, and now like I have an opportunity, I'm in charge of this fund or whatever. So I just think don't sleep on the fact that right now in your life there are people who can be in your community for a really long time. And like this, I'm gonna make myself sound super old now, but like there was no way to stay connected with people when I was young in the way there is now. And like social media has all kinds of challenges, right? And is problematic in all kinds of ways. And yet there are people now that I can reach out to who I haven't talked to in 20 years because, and again, this will make me sound old because we're friends on Facebook. But you're at an age where like you should start to think about what LinkedIn looks like for you and starting to build a more professional sort of social media presence so that you can stay in touch with people as you go out into the world. And just know that there's no harm in asking. The worst anyone can ever say is no. And so to build your community in a way that there are people that you can reach out to after 20 years and ask them for something super random, and they might respond because they remember you as someone who took the moment, took a time to build community with them when you were young.
All right.
Yes, I agree with everything that was set up here. I think community is super important, so thank you all for sharing. Now I would like to ask you, what makes a good leader? What does a good leader do? How does a good leader behave? What do they say? Like, what does it take to be a leader in your community?
Why don't you start? There you go, sister. You'll start this one, she'll start the next one. Equity, right?
There you go.
I love it. And if I have to say this, but forgive me, I'm not pushing. I was just realizing, because I do the same thing. I'll make jokes about being older, because I am, you know, and social media and Facebook and my lack of technology sometimes or whatever, you know. But I realize in a room full of women, being older is a good thing. You know, we're so ageist, right? Usually that is against young people, but we're also against age and wrinkles and time. And no, I mean, there's 3-4 women, right, that are older up here that have wisdom, and you all want to have a long, successful, impactful life of meaning and consequence, right, and get to a point where you have something, you know, so. Age is good.
Yeah, it is. Oh no, I think it's good. I just wanted. I knew I was just going to make some dated references.
But I'm a product of my society, and I still will make jokes all the time. Maybe I shouldn't. Anyway, what was the question?
What does it look like to be a leader in your community?
What does it look like to be a leader? You know, I'm in a unique position because I am an academic, and so by definition, we're trained to be neutral and to be somewhat removed. Hopefully not with our teachers, with our students when we're teaching. So I lead in a different kind of way because I created a research center that is very public and does really engage, right? We're nonpartisan, we're not on the ground organizing or mobilizing or advocating, but we lead through our work. And personally, I lead through my voice and stretching that role further, right? So the research and the knowledge that myself and my center and my colleagues have, being bold and feeling like I have a sense of responsibility in getting that information out, even when I may not always believe. I've had my own imposter syndrome, of course, and may not always believe that I have the best thing to say or the most intelligent thing to say, and realizing it doesn't matter if it's the best thing. Maybe it is, but I don't have to hold myself to that question. What matters is if I have to say something that I think nobody else is saying that's important. And sometimes you have to have the courage to say something that maybe you don't really want to say it, you know? You don't want to get out there, you don't want to be on the live radio, you don't want to stand up in front of your group or whatever, but leadership is saying what needs to be said, even in the face, it's many things, but it's also even in the face of your own fear or concern or doubt. So I try my best at that, and I think the most impactful leaders are the ones that are always out there pushing the conversation, standing up for people, changing the conversation. They put their voice out there, and hopefully are connecting and sharing and mentoring and doing all that to help others put their voice out there.
Again, I double click on all of that. I think there's a couple of things, and I think women are particularly strong leaders because we prioritize different things. I think women are better listeners, and I think listening is a hugely important part of leadership. You can be just one voice out in the world saying what you say, but if you've spent the time listening to others, hearing their perspective, you can amplify a lot of voices as a leader instead of just sort of your own. And I think that's to me as a leader, when I took this position, I spent a lot of time listening. I had worked in educational equity. I had not worked in the girls and women's space, despite it being a lifelong passion of mine. And so I wasn't an expert on day one, but I was expected to be. I'd been hired to be a CEO. And so it was really important to me to listen to the people who've been doing this work and learn from them. And I think that's a really important part of leadership. I think there's a sense that you just stand up at a podium and say something, but I think the more that you can do the work and listen. And then I think it's really important to be an advocate, because not everybody is going to have the time or the space or the privilege to be at a podium. And so I am a white cisgender woman, right, with a particular lived experience. I represent an organization where the majority of our girls are girls of color who are coming from systemically under-resourced communities. What I think I can do in my leadership role is go into spaces where those folks maybe don't always feel welcome and pull people out, pull resources out, and bring them to where they're needed. And so I think that is, I need to tap into what my various privileges are and help amplify and bring them to a space where others may not have always traditionally had access. So I think those to me are two really important aspects of being a leader.
All right. Thank you, my sisters. Really great answers. So leadership, I'm going to touch on the fire department again. So on the fire ground, when there's a fire and there are 35 firefighters showing up at once, whoever's in charge needs to be an autocratic leader. And that's just because of our priorities and public safety and firefighter safety. However, I'm not always an autocratic leader. That's not my gig. I too like to listen to others and get opinions because they may be the subject matter expert. I get the ultimate decision, or the mayor has the ultimate decision, but I listen to others. And if you want to see a leader, if you want to see somebody who's a pretty cool leader, look up Mayor London Breed and just watch one of her speeches. She is incredible. She grew up in the projects in San Francisco, and now she's the mayor, and she is, it would be an incredible thing for you to watch. Just look her up on YouTube, London Breed. Anyways, so my leadership, I think it's important as women, we don't need to mimic what men have done over the years. Nor would I want to, because that's not me. So I think it's important to be kind. I think it's important to bring joy into spaces. Obviously, it's also important to be decisive, but it is really important to listen to others that have different experiences than I do. And so that's what I've done. We've been able to set up this program called City EMT, which is now a huge, huge program within the city and county of San Francisco, which brings underprivileged kids from the actually at-risk youth from the age of 18 to 26 in to take an EMT class, and they get wraparound services, and then they get a chance to come work for us. And we've hired almost 24 young people from that program in the last couple of years. So that's just another thing that leadership looks like. And so when I'm out there in public, I usually wear a uniform. So I command some amount of respect. But when I take my uniform off and I'm out in public, most people don't give me the time of day because I am an older woman. And that's just the facts. That's just how it is. So I think it's really important to utilize my platform. When I was growing up, nobody looked like any of us in this room that were in, nobody in the fire service looked like any of us in this room. And now, granted, there are only 15% women in the San Francisco Fire Department, and that is the highest percentage of women in the country. So it's very male-dominated, and it's pretty cool having dudes have to salute you all the time.
That's the quote of the day.
Right, yeah.
Did somebody get that?
Yeah.
Thank you all. I think we're going to try and take those messages to heart. And I also think that perfectly leads into my next question, which is, how do we better empower and encourage young women to take on leadership roles in our community? And Ms. Ross, I think we're going to start with you this time.
Yes, we are.
So I think a big thing is that leadership exists everywhere. You do not have to be president of your student council to be a leader at your school or in your community. You can be a leader in your friend group. You can be a leader in the club that you love. So I wanted to be president of the United States when I was 7 years old. I still wanted to be president of the United States. It's not too late. I wanted to be president of the United States when I was 17. But I went to a gigantic high school, like 3,000 kids. And our student government was very much focused on like a very small cohort of very popular kids who were the president. So I was president of my high school drama club. And that was a great leadership experience for me. I was able to organize events and do fundraisers, and there were some sort of difficult decisions we had to make about the future of how we were going to do student productions and all these different things. So I got a lot of leadership experience there. And I had to be the leader of my peers, right? We had a budget. We had to decide how to use that money. I had to say to friends, like, I don't think that's a priority. I don't think we should do this thing. And those are, leading your peers is harder than anything, right?
Yes.
You don't have a uniform, no one is forced to salute you. And so it's a very different thing. So I think look at the places in your life where you care about something, and where is there a space where you can stand up for something you believe in. And that can look like starting to advocate in your community. So our girls, we work with elementary and middle school girls. We're gonna start soon working with high school girls. Our girls, at the end of their BOLD unit, where they learn about advocacy, they identify an issue at their school, and we support them as they advocate for a change at their school. So we had a series of schools. We work in big LUSD schools where there is no shade, there is no grass. And so our girls were like, there needs to be a safer, shady place for kids to be able to sit during recess if they don't want to be out on the blacktop. And so our girls advocated with their schools and built benches and identified the shady spaces and put them there. And we had another where, like, after lunch there was trash everywhere, and like the kids didn't care, and they were leaving it to the one plant manager to come after lunch and clean up everything after lunch. And so they launched a campaign and really informed and we're talking about, these are like 7 and 8 year olds, right? But they led a campaign at their school to educate their peers about what it meant when they didn't throw their trash away, when they didn't recycle after lunch. And so I think it is okay to start small. You do not have to be the president of the United States to make a difference in the world. And in a lot of cases, standing up for something you believe in your own backyard is the best way to gain the skills that you can then apply. Guess what? I went to college and I was a senator in my college, and I ended up having a lot of influence on the way that a lot of things happened. Everything from the way meal plans were accessible to, at the time there was not anonymous HIV testing on campus, so if you needed an HIV test at school, your parents saw that you had it taken if they were paying for your health insurance. So it really was discouraging people to get a very necessary test. And so there are all these ways you can advocate, but it is learn the skills early by choosing something that may seem small or insignificant, but I promise you it won't be.
All right then. Go ahead, Lonnie. Did I go yet?
No, neither of you did.
No.
Oh, you didn't go.
You haven't gone
already
either.
went. All right.
This is your equity plan
Oh my
we put in
God.
place
Is this
here.
a leadership question?
This is how do we empower and
I'm
encourage
after you.
young women?
Oh, how do we empower and encourage young women? So I'll go back to a little bit of what I said. So a little bit of it is, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And so I think it's really important for women in certain roles to own their space and get out there and let others see them. In the fire department, again, you're going to get sick of hearing about the fire department, but that is my life right now. I'm married to it. 30 years ago, we started Women in the Fire Service group for the San Francisco Fire Department, and we started empowering one another. And women had only been in a few years when I came into the department, so we definitely leaned on those women, and we had to find male allies as well. And that was super important. But they needed to listen to us and not just tell us what to do. So I think it's important to be an example, to lead by example. And I also think that for me, hiring people is huge, because they're going to be running they're going to be in the San Francisco Fire Department for the next 30 years. So who do I want in there? And I want all sorts of people. I want a variety of background experiences, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm really intentional about who I hire. And I think that will ultimately, I might not see the change right now, but hopefully in another 10 or 15 years, we will see the change where we have a lot more female leaders in our department. And so I also think it's really important to reach back, for me to get out there and go to schools and go to you know, whether it's even reading to a third grade, so people have the visual of a female fire chief. Super important. So it's all about supporting one another. You know, and in the fire service, what I saw, you know, 20 years ago, I see it occasionally now, is if there's a woman who's not the greatest in the world, other women will talk to the men about how bad she is. And that's not what we need. You either, if you don't have anything nice to say about a sister, whoop, keep it zipped, you know, because we are all trying to move forward. And so support in whatever way I can is super important to me. And so United Fire Service Women, this women's employee group, also it offers training to women on really physical, hard stuff that, you know, when you're there with the dudes and they're all beating their chests and, you know, and giving you the attitude like, you're too small, you can't do this. You know, when we train with women and we learn these skills and we support one another, oh, talk about empowering. Oh, geez, I'm sorry, I'm all confused, sister. I'm all confused.
Well, I will echo everything that's already been said on this question. I was trying to think, what would I add to it, right? So maybe a couple of things. One is just from my own experiences, my own perspective here. And sometimes you know this from the very beginning, sometimes you don't know it, right? And it'll evolve and change, you know, through your 20s and your 30s. But when you identify, or you seek to identify and you figure out what really drives you, what you are interested in, right? What is the change you want to see in the world? What is the topic that gets you ticked off, right? What is in your gut, the thing that you think is not right, isn't fair, that you want to fight a fight for, whatever exactly that fight looks like, right? When you get to that point, because I just assume that this room here, all of you are going to be more likely, right, to have something churning already in you, or at least get to that point. If you can connect your life's work to that gut feeling, that's going to compel you to be a leader. That's going to, like what I was saying earlier about like doing things and saying things that you may not always be comfortable in, right? I do a lot of media now. And I'm fairly comfortable with it now, but for a long time in the beginning, I wasn't comfortable with it at all. You know, are you going to do a live radio show to talk about your new piece of research? The last thing I wanted to do, right? Oh my God, just because it's just kind of scary too. And what if you screw up and then, you know, and you sound silly, or you mess up your research, you don't want to hurt the cause or whatever, right? Or you just tick off the university. I was at UC Davis in the beginning of my career. But I did all the things that I did, right, and still do today, but back then, because I felt compelled, like I had to. I had a sense of responsibility. It always was, well, how could I not take this opportunity, right, to maybe change your mind or share important information? And so that gut feeling that, you know, is what drove me and still drives me today, drove me to start my research center, because I felt like there was nobody else doing exactly. There was a gap out there that needed to be done. Didn't think that I was necessarily the best person to do it, but it didn't matter. I didn't have to fight that battle in my head, because I was like, nobody else is freaking doing it. So I felt compelled, right, to do it, because I was connected to that gut feeling that I've had since I was 10 years old, looking around my community and realizing that it sure looked like, and most people in my community felt like nobody cared about us, right? Outcomes were way below everywhere else. Nobody was going to the city council. Nobody was talking about my community. People were not voting in my community when you think that you should be having actually maybe a louder voice in a community, right, that is getting the short end of the stick. And wondering why the heck, you know, that's the case, and not knowing how politics works, not studying yet, and understanding the barriers to voting, but I just had a gut feeling, right, a gut reaction that is still there today, that that's not right and not fair, right, and something should be done about it, right, to make sure people have equal voice and opportunity, and it translates to outcome. So all that just to say, as much as you can figure out what that is that compels you, right? And let that take you forward and connect your life's work to that. Now, you may spend 2 years, 5 years, 10 years building a skill set, so it doesn't seem like you're taking a straight line to it, but that skill set is about getting you to the point where you can have impact on what you care about. And then really quickly, sorry, the other thing I was going to say is, because I know we're close on time, is so much of what we see out there to encourage young women doesn't, to be really honest, differentiate between the different experiences that young women have, by income, by race, by neighborhood, by ethnicity, by culture, by religion, whatever it might be. And I just know in my own experiences, but in so many young women that I talk with, your barriers, how you see yourself, what your goals are, what connects you, what drives you, where you're going to go in life. There's huge differences, right? In this room, there are huge differences, and so many of the programs that are out there don't really differentiate enough to connect, right? Help young women connect to who they are and what the realities of their own lives are. So as much as you can find those supports that identify and call out those realities that you're living in, but also as you go forward, then as much as you can support young women and have honest, frank conversations about, hey, I know you're living with these experiences, and I can guess that maybe it's making you feel less than other women, right, in our school, right, or more fearful, or more hopeful, or more driven, or whatever it is. But calling all that's our power. Instead of hiding it or not talking about it, or not recognizing it, calling it out, recognizing it, and fueling it is what leads, I think, to change, but also to much stronger women.
Nice job.
So I think we have time for just like 1 or 2 more questions, and then we're going to take questions from the audience. So this may be the last question, but I might have one more. How can we be the most effective in making positive, long-term impacts on our community? We can start with you.
Yeah, that's a good one. And, I think we can get really overwhelmed with all the stuff that we see in the world that we think is wrong. All right, I can get overwhelmed with all the stuff in the world that I see is wrong, and I want to fix so many things. But all I can do is start with one step in the direction where I want to go. One step of doing something good, what I deem is good. That's really how I have continued to try to make some change in the community that I'm in. I started as a firefighter. I worked my tail off and worked my way up. And now, even in my position, because my position is political, I don't always get to do what I think is the right thing to do. So then I have to recalibrate because the electeds don't want to do what I think is the right thing to do. I have to go back and recalibrate and figure out, oh, okay, so what is it we can do that is taking a step in the right direction? And so it can be really frustrating. It can be really frustrating. Here I am in this position and I should be able to do X, Y, and Z. That's not how the world works. And so I think just literally, I'll say it again, one step in the right direction. We can only do so much. And if that step doesn't work, take another step. Take it a step to the side or in another direction. But just keep trying to do the next right thing. That has been my mantra for my entire career. Just do the next right thing, whatever it is. Whether it is putting oxygen on a patient, whether it is dragging a hose line in a building, whether it is writing up a policy that's going to protect my members from getting cancer, whatever it is, do the next right thing. I had all these ideas and ideals when I came in as the fire chief that I was going to change, like, oh yeah, we're going to get all this stuff done. Because I wasn't a political person prior to this. I didn't care for politics and sort of the way it went. But I had to learn pretty fast about politics, and I had to learn how to, make friends with some people that I wouldn't necessarily, want to befriend. I had to get all the information to all the electeds that wanted the information, and I wasn't allowed to pick and choose. So, but I still got to go back and try to do the next right thing. And so that's just my thing. Keep it simple, do the next right thing.
I love that. I think probably my last answer covered really the rest of it. But the only thing I'd add maybe is just, and I think maybe this is what you're talking about too, being strategic. Don't give up. Don't try not to be discouraged. Think about the next battle or the next part of the next battle. I like to say, you always speak truth to power wherever you possibly can, but sometimes you have to be strategic. And maybe the last thing I'll say, just because I do want to make sure we get to all your questions, is something I've learned is just the importance of consistency. So when you're being strategic, sometimes it feels like you have to be a little, can't think of a better word right now, but two-faced, right? You're not saying what you really think because you got to hold your mouth, right, to get that funding or to get or whatever. And I'm bad with working with elected officials. I'm a researcher, so I'm a researcher. I tell them what to do. No, I don't. But I think that it's a long game. Right? At least if you're serious to make, if you want to go down this path and you've decided you want to, have the potential of a long game impact, then it does matter what you say now. It matters what you say in 5 years. It matters what you say in 10 years. So you may have to stop fighting something and play nice on the particular item, but I would say, don't compromise. Still be true, still say what you believe, still say the right thing, right? Maybe deliver it in some ways that you don't quite want, but in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, when everybody figures out what you said was right, was the right thing, right? You're on record for saying, I'm serious, you're on record for saying the right thing. I've fought a few battles over the years that I thought, crap, I'm ruining, I'm gonna ruin my reputation about this, or I'm gonna lose some important support. These people are pushing back on what I'm saying, and I'm probably the only one that thinks it, but damn it, I'm gonna say it anyway, But then I find out that I wasn't the only one who thought it, right? Or the tide turned, and the person or the people that dominated the conversation were shown that they shouldn't be dominating the conversation, right? And you're on record, you always stay true essentially as much as you possibly can. Be strategic where you have to be, but stay true to what you believe and think about kind of being on record. It may not seem like, well, why do I need, I'm not a public official, but on record in sense of your own integrity. Does that make sense? I bet you you'll be, in the end, you'll be shown to be the right, and even if you aren't, it doesn't matter. You have an internal consistency. Those people who know you and work with you and respect you and come back and want to ask you to run an organization or whatever it might be, it's because people will see your ethics, your integrity, your drive, your commitment, your belief system. Even if you don't end up winning, you'll win in a different way, and you'll have, what's important, it's not winning, it's having impact, right? You'll have impact in a different way. So I just want to kind of emphasize that.
To me, the way that you make lasting change is you don't do it alone. Nobody has ever changed the world by themselves. So I think, everybody, when they think of the civil rights movement, they think about Martin Luther King because he was very much the face of the civil rights movement. He had a literal army of people who worked with him, in support of him, and actually they were not much older than you. There's an incredible book called The Children by David Halberstam. I highly recommend it. It is about the 17, 18, 19-year-olds who were the foot soldiers of the civil rights movement. The folks who got on those buses, who sat at those lunch counters. Martin Luther King gave the speeches, and let's be clear, he had he was beaten, he was assassinated, he spent time in jail. But there were hundreds of people who did that work and moved the needle. And so, yes, there are Gandhi, there are all these faces of great movements that changed things, but these folks never did it alone. And so in anything you're doing, think about who is the community you are building around you of supporters. And I'm going to put a plug. So a movie came out on Netflix last night. It's called Shirley. It is about Shirley Chisholm. She was the first black woman to run for president. She was the first black congresswoman. She ran for president in 1972. What mattered about that, that was the first year 18-year-olds could vote. Before that, you had to be 21 to vote. And so they were sending people off to fight in Vietnam who were not old enough to vote. Shirley Chisholm, she did this thing that nobody thought was possible, and she built a movement. And there was a woman who worked for her named Barbara Lee, who was 25 years old, who didn't believe in politics, had never voted before. And Shirley changed Barbara Lee's view on what politics was and what politics could be. Does anybody know who Barbara Lee is now?
I do.
She's a congresswoman in the Bay Area. She also just ran for the Senate. And so the idea is you do this thing, you build the people around you, and you open doors for the people behind you, right? And so I think that that's what we talked about is we may not see every change, but it is what are you doing? What are the building blocks? Who are the people around you that you're empowering, right? Barbara Lee was 25. She'd never worked in politics. She was a single mom. And Shirley Chisholm gave her a huge role on the campaign. And she played a really huge role in helping her connect to different constituencies who helped her get delegates to take to the Democratic National Convention. Anyways, it's a fantastic movie. It's on Netflix. It came out last night. But I think it really sends that message, and it also just shows you what the challenges are that women faced in politics then that frankly we still face now. But it's really inspiring. I highly recommend it.
All right. Is she the one who said if there's no chair for you at the table, bring your own?
Yep. And she literally sometimes carried her own folding chair in Congress with her.
We're going to squeeze in one last, so keep the answers maybe a little bit concise.
Who, us?
Yes.
I can do that. I follow directions.
Okay. What would you say is the single best piece of advice that you've ever received about female leadership? And Dr. Romero, would you like to start?
Yeah, please.
Yes, she would. Yes, she would. There you go, sister.
Piece of advice. Oh gosh, I'm trying not to say something negative.
Okay.
I've had so many negative things said to me about female leadership that you just want to, just doubting women's abilities, but blah, 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 blah. I also was a single mom going through school and grad school, so I also got the doubting the mom, young single mom, low-income young single mom doubts about anything and everything I did. Just being a community college transfer student, to a major university, but then, how are you getting grades like this? Usually people like you don't get grades like this. Another woman said that to me, actually. But I will say that the pivotal points in my life were women. Yeah, they were the professor who had my back and encouraged me to go to grad school instead of law school. But she was right. That opened up my, connected my world to academia in ways that I never, it made me realize that could be the way that I fight my fight. I could contribute through academia, right? So what was the question exactly?
Single best piece of advice.
Single best piece of advice. I guess my mother, oddly enough, who told me, my mother's 86 years old and has no idea what I do. She doesn't understand any of it. She just can't. And I mean that with all due respect. She knows I am a professor. I have to say I'm a teacher. She doesn't understand the research. She doesn't understand grad school. She doesn't understand any of it. But in my circumstance, there's about 20 different reasons why I should have wound up in a very different set of life outcomes. But my mom said one thing to me. She said, get your education. She said, get your education. She didn't know what exactly that meant. She doesn't have an education. My dad has a 5th grade education. she didn't know what that would be. She certainly didn't think grad school. When I went into grad school, they thought I was crazy, that I should be, yeah. But I have to say, she was the only one in my world at that point as a kid saying anything about you have to get your education. You have to get your education. So sometimes it's the really simple things, right? So I just took that, I took that piece of advice and I just ran with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sort of stumped because I feel like in some ways you don't get advice, you live it. And so I think there's a lot of people who can tell you things, but until you actually experience it. But I had an incredible boss a few years ago, and I think for her, there were certain things I was sort of holding on to at my job that I was like, but if I let go of this, like I love this relationship or this partnership. And she was like, don't you want to do more? And sometimes the only way you can do more is to let go of other things. And to say like, okay, I did that well. Got to trust that I did it well enough that I can hand it off to somebody else and it'll be okay. So I think sometimes it's just a big part of being a leader is like taking that leap. There's sort of that take a leap and the net will appear. I'm not sure I believe that all the time, but I think if you've done the work to set yourself up, you got to trust yourself sometimes to take that next step, even if it seems really scary.
All right, I'll be concise because I know time is running. And I'm sorry I can't stay after. I have to go catch a plane. But in any case, the single most important piece of advice, I'll say three things. Relationships are so important, just basically in life, but certainly in leadership. So make sure you have the right people around you that support you, that can hold your head up, that can listen to you, that can give you sage advice. Make sure you have the right people around you, and it won't be easy, but you can do it.
Thank you so much. We can open it up to the audience if anybody has any questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Being a leader is hard. How have you persevered through even the hardest times?
I can speak to that.
If you want, give the mic to them so that you can hear better.
Yeah.
So how have I persevered even in the hardest times? Watch the grammar. Okay, so I'll give you another example in the fire department. In 2009, I was in my first supervisor role, and we went to a fire, and it was an arson fire, and 6 of us got burned, and one of my colleagues that I was in charge of ended up in the ICU in the hospital for 3 weeks, and then off duty for 1.5 years with burns, inhalation burns. I was also burned, and I remember feeling responsible, so responsible, that it was all my fault because I didn't know it was an arson fire at the time, and they had poured flammable liquid in the ceilings and in the floor joists and everything. So I thought it was all my fault because I didn't know what I was doing. And what I did was I surrounded myself with the people who could understand and who could encourage and lift me up and hear me out. And that's what worked for me. I will also say I had a little grit already going into that. So it's important that you have your grit, that you have resolve. And I had grit from doing really hard things, from whether it was coming out to my parents in the 80s or first becoming a firefighter. So, keep your grit in your hip pocket and keep your friends close.
I can't imagine a tougher situation than being a pioneering woman in a fire department.
Oh, there's tougher.
So,
Maybe a police.
There's tougher.
That's up there, though. I don't know. I mean, I think everybody's situation is real, right? And your own challenges are your challenges. And I think I've talked about them, alluded to some for me. And how do you overcome those? I think it is finding your support network in anywhere that you can, making your own community, right? Mm-hmm. But maybe just to touch on the grit part, sometimes you just won't have that. I was thinking about that over the last 45 minutes. I just want to say that because, again, everybody, whoever is out there. Sometimes you won't have that. And how the hell do you have a life, right? And do what you want to do and feel fulfilled and have impact when maybe you don't have a lot of support. And you just have to, and I don't want to say like you just have to do it because that's not realistic, right? But sometimes it is maybe a lot of what you do is doing what people tell you you shouldn't do. And I don't mean like encounter, like I'm going to show them, although that can help too sometimes. But sometimes you do just get barriers after barriers, or you get people who tell you you shouldn't do something, or you should wait, or you're stupid, or you're being a bad parent, or you're whatever it might be. And you do have to, even if you don't totally believe it, you do have to just, that's where if you're connected to what compels you, right? You're on that path no matter what, and you push forward no matter what, and you look for and you recognize, where can I get that support? Maybe it's my best friend, maybe it's only my best friend, right? Maybe it's one professor in another school that I connected with, or whatever it might be. You look for those places that mean something to you, and those people that believe in you, and you just kind of keep pushing and understand that even if 90% of the people around you are telling you you're stupid or you're crazy, or just subtly, oh, of course that's wonderful that you want to do that. But you know that's a really hard path. You know, maybe you want to take it, just start a little lower, right? Whatever it might be. Sometimes it's very, very subtle. You just, sometimes you have to ignore the 90%. And you might think, it's 90%. They must be right and I'm wrong, right? They must be right and I'm wrong. No, you have to ignore the 90%. If you are connected to what you really believe in, you'll figure it out. And maybe they're a little right on something. So what?
Right.
Keep forging ahead, you'll figure it out.
I heard a woman speak earlier this week who created a makeup company, and for like 20 years, all she heard was no's, and eventually she sold it for $1 billion. And she read this poem that she wrote that said, "You're not crazy, you're just first." So I feel like that speaks very much to what you're saying. Here's the one thing I'll say. 2 of the worst things that ever happened to me ended up being the greatest gifts. Times when I was completely devastated in a relationship and also in a job I didn't get, where I just was like, but I did everything right. I worked so hard. I dotted my I's and crossed my T's, and like, I lived and breathed this. I look back and I'm so grateful those things didn't happen, because they set me on a path for something completely different that was better, that everything about my life is better, because those things I desperately wanted to happen didn't happen. And so it didn't feel like that at the time. It felt awful. I cried. I was mad. I was frustrated. I talked to my friends. I talked to my family, like whatever the thing was. But I just want to tell you that in those moments of the lowest of the low, sometimes it's literally the best thing that could have ever happened to you. And it doesn't feel that way on the first day. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way on the 10th day or the 50th day. But someday you'll look back and be like, oh, thank God. Thank God that thing didn't happen. And so just know that you're going to hit bumps and things are going to feel awful. But it will be okay.
More questions?
And they could be for individuals too, if you don't,
So what is the best way to combat discrimination or people questioning your leadership because of your gender?
Easy question. You go first. You go first. Sure. I was kidding.
It's not an easy question. Well, competency.
Yeah.
That's true. Seriously.
Yeah.
Competency, don't let them get you, certainly, but just just keep forging ahead doing your work. I mean, that is where I think times have changed, and there's fewer of those voices. They still exist, and often they're kind of, they're more muted, more hidden. They still exist. But I think just being confident, and maybe after a while you start to get a sense. Like I can tell when I'm dealing with a colleague that's sexist or somebody in leadership. in a university that's sexist or whatever it might be. An elected official. And usually there's multiples. You know, it's multiples. It's not just they're not just sexist. They got lots.
They're
of things.
intersectional.
They're intersectional in lots of ways. And I think maybe also part of being strategic is actually, instead of ignoring it, you ignore it in your work, but is to try to get a sense of being able to identify that, not in a way that you're going to internalize and it's going to slow you down, but identify it for strategic purposes. So you know when somebody's reacting to you because they really have an issue that's viable and you should be talking about it, or because they're sexist, right, or whatever it is. I think, unfortunately, maybe our generation definitely, we've had to do that. You've had, you know, but I would argue it's probably a pretty dang good skill to have for younger women as well, because it exists. We just don't talk about it as much, but it exists.
Oh,
Can I just say something? I'll just say something real
I don't
quick, because I know there are lots of questions. Yes, competency is certainly one of them, but calling stuff out, being an ally. So if I hear somebody say something, you know, racist or homophobic or whatever it is, don't just sit there and not say something. Say like, you know, and you don't have to like be the loudest voice in the room and scream at them, but call it out. And teach yourself about how to be an ally. It's not marginalized groups' responsibility to teach people like me, white people, how to be an ally. It's my responsibility to learn how to be an ally. And so be curious about that and learn about it and call it out when you see it. So, yeah.
I agree. Let someone else ask a question. I agree.
I have 3 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, I got 3 minutes.
We can maybe.
Who wants to close us out? Maybe this young man. Got one right here. Oh,
Right there?
sorry, there's a bunch. It's hard. You can come find us after.
What are some things that inspired you to take action into becoming a leader?
You know, when I got in the fire department, I thought, oh my God, I've won the lottery. I'm going to be a firefighter in San Francisco. Are you kidding me? I get to help people. Like, I get to use my body because I was an athlete. And I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And then I had about, I want to say like 8 or 9 years in, and they finally gave a promotional exam to go to the next rank of lieutenant. And I was like, nah, I'm not going to take it. I'm good. And then I saw some of the dum-dums that were going to take it. And I was like, oh, hell no. I am never working for that person. And that literally really inspired me. And, you know, and so I scored really high out of 800 people on the test. I was number 7. I was driven. I was
amazing.
I wanted to, and that just built my confidence. Not working for that idiot.
Nothing has ever inspired me more than someone telling me I can't do something. I love nothing more than proving somebody wrong. And so I do think, I had a college counselor who told me I couldn't go to the college I wanted to go to, and I was like, oh, watch me. And I think, and so I just think from, you know, no is never a permanent no. Now as someone who asks people for money all the time, I hear no sometimes, and then 6 months later, something has changed and they're able to do it. So I think to me, like, there's nothing more motivating than proving somebody wrong.
Mm-hmm. I got to go.
Yeah, we might not have time for one more question.
You might, but I don't.
Yes, we don't want you to miss your flight, especially in the rain.
If you two can stay, maybe
stay for
some
a
people
minute.
can ask questions. So
I actually have to get to, speaking of women's leadership roles, a board meeting that I'm chairing.
Oh, I'm happy to hang out and answer a few questions.
but let's do one round of applause for everyone. Thank you so much.
Yay.